Hey everybody, it's Angela, and I'm just going to do an altered book today. And you can see this one is kind of falling apart already, so I'm just going to help it along by taking out the interior pages. And so I want to reuse this cover, so I'm trying to be really careful here not to rip anything because it is old. Actually, I took out this front portion so I could save it, and it has the copyright of 1901. So that makes it 113 years old, so a really old book cover. Also going to save this interior page of some music notes that I thought was kind of cool, so I want to incorporate that back into the book. And then all the illustrations, there were a lot of beautiful illustrations in here, so I just go through and pull those out as well. And then I want to take off any loose paper and stuff, and so I'm just going to pull that off because I'm going to glue some new paper on, and I don't want to glue it onto something that's not going to stick down well. So you don't have to remove it all, perfectly, just all the loose material. So I go ahead and I kind of scrape some loose adhesive off that burlap fabric in the center, and I'm going to glue down my own new fabric that'll help take the stress off of this old binding. And so I just go ahead and get the last of the little loose bits out of there, and then I use a cotton fabric, just some leftover that I use for quilting and stuff that I had, and I choose this kind of white one with the stars. You're not going to see very much of it. I just need something to span my hinge areas. So I go ahead and trim a piece of that. Normally I would probably use Fabri-Tac glue, but I didn't have any, so I'm using some of this Scotch Quick Dry. And I'm applying the glue just to the cardboard areas of the spine and the cover. I don't want to get any glue in the hinge area. I just want my fabric to span that so that, it takes up the stresses of it opening and closing. So I just put my fabric on there and I press it down really well, use my bone folder, and make sure I get good adhesion. And I blast it a little bit with my heat gun just to make sure the glue sets, and then I'm going to set the whole journal aside to dry. And this book is going to have signatures in it, 4 signatures of about 6 pages each. So I want to measure out what my max page size would be. A lot of my scraps are smaller, so there'll be a lot of smaller pages, but I just wanted to mark down what my max size would be. So I measure out the top to bottom, and then on the side to side measurement, I double it because I'm going to fold all the pages in half. And you'll see here in a minute when I go through that. So I just take my scraps and I just start going through looking for pieces. And I really wanted to do this journal because I haven't done an altered book or a junk journal in a while, and I know that some of my subbies, that's what they like, and they probably get tired of me doing layout process videos. But when I do the layouts, I save all the scraps, and then I usually do some junk journals with the scraps that are left over. So you can see I have a lot of small pages. I folded them all in half. I'm just making sure they're creased really well. And then I have a bunch of kind of full-size pages as well. And then I also save a bunch of scraps, and I'm going to use my Spellbinders dies to make some tuck spots with it as well. But first I just grab a whole bunch of my edge punches, and I'm going to go through just random pages and do some different edgings on them just to add some interest and use some tools that I already have on hand. So that was kind of nice to be able to dip into all those punches and use those. So after I've got that done, I want to make my 4 signatures, and I want to mix them up, some of them full-size pages, some of them smaller pages, and then some of them with punched edges, and just kind of get the colors dispersed between each signature. And so I just kind of decide how I want it to go together. And you can see I just kind of nest them all together like that. And there are my 4 signatures. Then I grab my Spellbinders, the Grand Nest Abilities, and I use 2 sizes to make these little tuck spots. And I just cut them out and fold them in half. And then I sew them. And I've sewn them on 2 sides, across the bottom and the right-hand side for this horizontal tuck spot, and down the side and across the bottom on these vertical tuck spots. And then I'm just tying off my thread ends so that they don't unravel. You could just use a little bit of glue, but I kind of like to tie them off and then leave the strings kind of hanging loose just because I like that look. And after that, I grab a whole bunch of my stamps, roller stamps, acrylic stamps, rubber stamps, and I just go at it. Again, it's really nice to be able to pull all those out and use the tool that I already have on hand. And so I'm just going through random bits throughout the book and just interspersing those throughout. And then you can see I've marked my center spot on the height, and then I've marked 2 more marks on each side of my center hole. And I'm just transferring those marks to 4 different lines. So there's going to be 4 lines on the spine where my 4 signatures are going to go. And then each signature is going to have 5 holes in it to sew it on there. And you can see that I've already covered the cover and the spine with paper on there as well. So then I take that same template that I used to mark my spine, and I just put it in the center of each signature and poke the holes in my signature. And I'm going to use that same template to poke the holes in the spine. I just kind of forgot to do that. So I'll realize that I forgot it here in a minute and go back in and punch those holes. So you just punch them. That way everything's the same. The holes in your spine are the same as the holes in the signatures. Everything matches up. And I get some heavy duty thread. This is a brand called Coates, Coates, I believe. And it's just a heavy duty thread. And then I just find a needle that has an eye big enough for this thread to go through. And I make my thread about 3 times the height of my page. And that seems to make sure I don't run out for this type of sewing technique. So then I realized I'd marked my holes on the spine, but I hadn't actually punched them. So I just go through and punch them. And then I go through the center hole of my signature and through the center hole of the book. And then I go down 1 hole and back in through the signature. Then I go down 1 hole and back out through the spine. And then I go up 1 hole and back through that same hole. And then I go up 1 more and back through that center hole again. And it's a little fussy, especially on this first signature, to get it all going. And then after I get that through the hole, I go up 1 more hole right here and back into my signature. Then I go up another hole to the very top hole. And then I'm going to go down back through the same hole right below. And that puts me back into the center of my signature, and that's where I'm going to tie it off. And again, I just knot it a few times and I leave some tail thread ends hanging. And I'll do this 1 more time so you can see it again. So that's my first signature in there. So I go in through the center and in through the center of my spine. Then I go down a hole, back into the center of the signature. Then I go down a hole through the bottom hole of the spine. Then I go back up through the same hole that I did previous. Then I go back down through the center hole. Then I go up 1 hole, back into the signature. I go up 1 hole, back out through the spine. Then I go down to the previous hole, back into the signature, and then I just tie it off. And it's, pretty simple. The hardest part is just, getting it lined up with those holes. And then I leave some threads hanging. So I decide I want to make those not quite as white on there, the threads. So I do grab a couple inks and I put some copper on the edges there, a little bit of red on the threads so they don't stand out quite so much. And then I go and grab this, my thing of flowers. And this is an enamelware basin that my husband's family was nice enough to let me have out of my mother-in-law's effects, because I collect a lot of the enamelware. And so I brought this home to put all my flowers and stuff in. And my husband goes, I remember that basin. He's like, that's the puke bowl. He goes, what my mom would always give us, when we were sick so that we could puke into it. And I'm like, gee, thanks, honey. So now I have a puke bowl full of flowers. So that seems appropriate and a nice memory of my mother-in-law. But anyhow, so I find a bunch of flowers I think will work. And then I'm just going through and editing them a little more. And I decide to put it on the bottom right-hand corner. And I want to make sure to get some red in there. And then I like this kind of chocolatey color. And then I like the brown because it kind of picks up on the brownish beige of the illustration on the front cover. And then I also cut a whole bunch of little flowers to just kind of fill in. And I start just gluing stuff down before I really thought about the fact of, do I want to put a doily or something underneath or any other stuff on the bottom? And so I get going and then I think about it. So I pull out my stash and I look, but I don't have a doily there that's the right color and stuff. But I do find some little bows, kind of little burlappy bows. So I put one of those in there. And then I also find a little metal key that I glue in as well. And so this is a pretty simple little junk journal. Like I said, it was to use up scraps. It comes out so beautiful. I kind of wish I had used vintage papers or tea-dyed papers and stuff like that. But the whole reason behind this was to use up a bunch of scrap paper and, use my tools and stuff like that. So that is about all I do to the front cover. And so I'm just going to do a quick flip through. Here you can see the illustration on the front. You can see some of my edge punches. I've taken the original illustrations and cut them down and just tucked them back in the book at various places. And I found some other ephemera pieces laying around that I just kind of tucked in. And, a lot of these papers will be covered up when I actually, start putting photos and things like that in here. But it gives me a place to start. That illustration I glued right onto that page. There's more of the tuck spots. You can see the sewing that I did to kind of make a little L there. This is the music note paper, and I just used a piece of score tape to put it on there so I can still put something behind. Have that little bit of music in there. I did my stamping, the Remember This stamping. There's another one of the original illustrations. Just beautiful illustrations. Some short pages, full-size pages. And then some more just ephemera, and you can see some of the stamping on the back ground. It was nice to pull out all the stamps, like the word story, love lives here, and stuff like that. And then in the very back, I took the title page from the front of the original book, and you'll see here in a second. I will get to it. There, right there. I put one of the illustrations on the front of it, just matted it on there. And then I left it kind of all attached. So it has the tissue paper, the front page of the book, and then you can flip it over and still see the 1901 copyright. So that is my completed junk journal or altered book. and I had a lot of fun making it. It was great to be able to use up some more of my scraps and get that back under control. And so if you have any questions or comments or anything, just leave them below. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you later. Bye.